Hello, and welcome to another video from 3.5 Archive. Today we're going to be doing another D&D 3.5 Prestige class review, and we're going to be looking at the Bone Knight Prestige class from the Five Nations sourcebook. Now, Five Nations is a sourcebook for the Eberron campaign setting, and Bone Knights are said to be Karn patriots. They are living protectors who fight alongside the undead legions of their land. Now, Eberron, being its own campaign setting, does also have the deathless type of creature who are similar to undead but not quite. These are the elves of the world, the elvish counselors that are very ancient and have transcended life but aren't quite really undead. However, Karn is a nation that uses a lot of undead in battle, and so these are undead lieutenants, or these are lieutenants of the undead, we should say, who are commanding legions of skeletons, zombies, ghouls, and the like into battle. So that should give you a general idea of what this prestige class is about. This one is geared towards clerics and soon-to-be ex-paladins. To become a Bone Knight, you need to have a base attack bonus of +4, 6 ranks in craft armor smithing, 4 ranks in knowledge religion, 6 ranks in ride, the ability to turn or rebuke undead, and the ability to cast first level divine spells. So this is open to quite a few different classes. You can come into this as a cleric or favored soul, although you will need to go a little bit further to get the required number of ranks in ride. So you're probably going to need to be a 9th level cleric to start out this prestige class. Whereas if you want to come into this as a paladin, you can do it right after 5th level. You'll be able to have all of the skill ranks. You're going to have the ability to turn undead, albeit not very well. And you're going to have the base attack bonus and, of course, the ability to cast first level divine spells. And this prestige class does have some more features specifically geared toward being a paladin. And also, as we'll see, it might be a little bit better for a paladin rather than a cleric when it comes to the fact that some of the abilities that this grants to the character would be easier to be obtained from just a regular cleric than a paladin would be able to. So in other words, if you're a cleric and you want some of these undead commanding related abilities, you probably should just keep being a cleric or find another prestige class. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Overall, I would rate this prestige class's requirements to be moderately restrictive. The reason being that you're going to need 3 different skills. And while you won't need those to be quite maxed out, at level 5 as a paladin, you are on average going to only have 16 skill points to work with, maybe 24 if you're playing a human or if you have a good intelligence score, and this prestige class is going to use up 16 of them, which isn't the end of the world, but it is definitely something to consider. A cleric's going to have to wait a little bit longer to get into this prestige class, as they're going to have to wait until 9th level to get the requisite number of ranks in ride. There doesn't seem to be a domain that will give you ride as a class skill, and if you want to, you could of course multi-class a little bit, but that's going to slow you down in your progression, and as we're going to see with the caster level progression of this prestige class, you're probably not going to want to distract from cleric at all if you are somehow going for levels in Bone Knight. So you're probably going to come into this as a paladin. Let's take a look at what you get from being a Bone Knight. You're going to get a D10 hit die. You're going to get 2 plus intelligence modifiers, skill points per level. You're going to get a 3/4 base attack bonus, which is not the greatest, and you're going to get a good fortitude save, which is okay, but it would be nice if you at least got a good will save as well. As for spellcasting progression, you're going to get an improvement to your spellcasting at every single level except for first. So there's 10 levels this prestige class, and 9 of them are going to improve your spellcasting. Only first level you're going to skip out on that spellcasting progression, which does hurt, but while it is a massive downside for prestige class, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. And keep in mind, if you come into this as a cleric for some reason, you're not going to be getting any class features anyway. So any class features you get here are a bonus, they're a benefit, and the only cost you have to really look at is the skill ranks that you put into this prestige class, which will be significant for a cleric, especially considering that there's the hidden cost of coming into this prestige class without concentration if you're fulfilling these requirements, and obviously that's a huge downside. Another thing worth mentioning is that this prestige class doesn't give concentration as a class skill, which is another issue. I mean, that's going to be an issue even for paladins that come in here, because paladins cast spells too, and actually a paladin's more likely to need concentration to cast defensively in melee, since they tend to be more often in melee than a cleric does. But even a cleric, and even this prestige class seems to be pretty melee focused, so the lack of concentration as a class skill is really weird and honestly a pretty huge downside. Fortunately, there's going to be less focus on your spellcasting, but even so, that's really not a good start. Also, you would of course want ranks in spellcraft as any kind of magic-related character, and that's not included in the prerequisites here either, so you're going to be kind of up a creek in that regard. You're going to be spending your skill ranks on craft armor smithing, but you're also going to be spending them later on in craft weaponsmithing to get the full scope of this prestige class's benefits. So something to keep in mind as we go through this, the skill ranks are the steepest requirement here for this prestige class. So hopefully you have a good intelligence, but this prestige class is also going to ask you to have a good wisdom score and charisma score, whether you're a cleric or paladin. So while intelligence is normally a dump stat for paladins, that's not going to work out for you here. So finally, let's get into these features here. At level 1, you're going to get Bonecraft Armor. This is going to allow you to produce a suit of armor made out of bone that would normally be made mostly of metal. Has the same cost and time to create as normal armor. It gives you a +4 in Intimidate checks, which is nice. It's also going to give you damage reduction 1/bludgeoning if it's going to be medium armor, and 2/bludgeoning if it's heavy. You're probably going to pick heavy armor. And of course, since it's made of bone, it's not going to be subject to spells like Chill Metal or Rust Monster's Touch. So that's nice. You could just get, adamantine armor and have damage reduction 3/nothing, but that's okay. You wouldn't get the +4 to Intimidate checks, I guess. And while you will have a good charisma bonus coming to this prestige class, I wouldn't see a lot of room in a build like this for some kind of Intimidate demoralization sort of build. So that bonus is probably not going to be worth a whole lot. Bonecraft Armor does get better though, so let's not give up on it yet. There's also Paladin Conversion. If you were a Paladin or ex-Paladin before becoming a Bone Knight, you can never advance in Paladin again, which makes sense. I don't know why there's not an alignment restriction on this prestige class, considering that you're interacting with undead so much. You should at least have to be non-good. But Eberron's a little bit different on these things. You will, however, retain Divine Grace, Lay on Hands, Aura of Courage, Divine Health, and then your Detect or Smite Evil abilities and Remove Disease. And you can use your Lay on Hands ability on living or undead creatures. You're going to lose your special mount, but you will get him back later with a skeletal mount, Skeletal Steed, as per the ability that you get later on in this prestige class. So that's pretty good. This really, again, gears the class a lot more toward being a paladin. You're going to come into this prestige class, lose a lot of your paladin stuff, but you will actually keep the important features, so that's pretty good. Also, at level 1, you're going to get Rebuke Undead. You can Rebuke Undead as a cleric of your Bone Knight level, and if you already could, then you add your Bone Knight level to your effective cleric level for Rebuking Undead now, and you lose the ability to turn undead if you could before. This is nice, although, again, you're probably going to be coming into this as a paladin who's not going to be very good at rebuking or turning undead in the first place. So it's not that exciting of a feature, but it is nice. And if you're going for some kind of divine metamagic type of build, then actually that really won't matter a whole lot. But you also, for your spellcasting, it's important to point out that you do get to add some divine spells to your spell list if you were a paladin before. You can add Bane, Death Watch, and Doom as first level spells, Death Knell, Desecrate, and Gentle Repose as second level spells, and Bestow Curse as a third level spell. So, of those, Desecrate will be great for your undead. Bane is an okay, debuffing spell, and Bestow Curse is nice if you're in melee a lot, but it's not going to be that fantastic, and with your lower caster level, and your possibly lower spellcasting stat, then it's not going to be that great for the save DC, but still a nice spell to have up your sleeve. Also at level 2, you're going to get Bone March. This will let you assume control of an animated undead from a willing caster as a standard action. You have to be within 60 feet and that sort of thing. So this basically lets other necromancers give you undead to control, which will be great if you have a party member who is raising undead but can't, control all of them because of the limit based on caster level, how many hit dice they can control, but they can give them to you instead, which will be great, except for the fact that the maximum hit dice of any single undead you control is equal to your Bone Knight level. So it's going to start out at 2 hit dice and eventually be up to 10 hit dice. And while you can command up to 4 times your hit dice, or 4 times your Bone Knight level, rather, in undead, that's not going to be that much. And you already would have this ability as a cleric that was able to cast Animate Dead. So it's really not clear if this is on top of it. It does say the maximum number you can command in this manner is equal to 4 times your class level. So this seems like extra hit dice of undead you can control on top of what you already would be able to, which would be cool, but it doesn't seem to be additive in terms of the maximum hit dice of any singular undead that you could control. So you're still limited by your Bone Knight class level, so it's almost like a secondary inferior pool of hit dice of undead that you can control, which is nice if you were a cleric, or if you're a paladin you didn't have any ability to do that in the first place. Then this would be a pretty solid ability, give you some undead minions. You do, however, at least for now, have to assume control of them from a willing spellcaster. So you're going to need a cleric ally in the party doing this for you. Also at level 2, you're going to gain the ability to summon a skeletal steed. This is going to be a heavy warhorse with the skeleton template applied. You can call them as the same fashion as a paladin, whose level equals your paladin level plus your Bone Knight level. So more reason to be a paladin. If you're not a paladin, then you're going to have a much less powerful steed. And the cool thing about a skeletal steed is that it cannot be turned while you ride it, which is pretty awesome if you're running into enemy clerics. I presume that this also applies to rebuking undead, but it's not quite clear. It's generally considered like a subset of that ability. So that's nice. Unfortunately, your steed's going to probably be quite a bit weaker if you are a paladin, or if you are a cleric rather. But even if you are a paladin, it's still a liability you have to be careful of, and again, steeds don't tend to lend themselves very well to delving into dungeons, so there is that to keep in mind as well. At level 3, you're going to grant any undead under your control turn resistance equal to your charisma bonus as long as they're within 60 feet of you, as per the Master of the White Banner ability. This is really great, again, if you're running into enemy good aligned clerics that are turning your undead minions, but if you're not, then it's going to be a pretty useless ability. So just to keep that in mind, this is going to be geared toward a very specific type of campaign, which, given if you're playing a prestige class like this, you're probably already in that type of campaign. But if you're in a sort of normal generic campaign where you just tend to pick this up because the rest of your party is either evil or neutral aligned and you figure you can get away with it, you're probably going to not run into a whole lot of good aligned clerics trying to turn undead on you. So this feature is kind of useless in that regard. At level 4, you're going to get improved Bonecraft armor. This is going to give you immunity to stunning attacks and non-lethal damage. This is pretty cool. If you have regeneration for some reason, like you somehow were allowed to play a forest troll from the Monster Manual 3 as a character and have regeneration, then you would basically be immune to hit point damage. There's also the Troll Blood feat from one of the Dragon magazines that can give you regeneration. And because regeneration makes any damage that you take non-lethal damage, unless it's of the specified thing that goes past your regeneration, then you would just be outright immune to hit point damage, which is pretty cool. And your Dungeon Master probably won't allow that. So practically speaking, that's not really that good. But being immune to stunning is nice. Stunning doesn't happen that often, but it can happen, maybe if you're up against a Mind Flayer or something like that. So this is good to have for that. At level 5, you're going to get Fill the Ranks. This lets you use a limited form of Animate Dead once a day. The target corpse rises as either a Karnathi skeleton or Karnathi zombie. These are 3 hit dice skeletons or zombies. They have better natural armor, and they aren't mindless like regular skeletons and zombies are. So you could have them, using some magic items or something in combat, or just attacking or being meat shields. Since it's a spell-like ability, you're not going to have to chip in that black onyx gem, and it would cost 150 gold pieces to raise one of these normally. So effectively, this saves you 150 gold pieces a day, which isn't nothing. And if you're on the move a lot and don't have access to a town or city, which you probably do at this point by the wizard in your party probably having teleport, if the wizard's not being cooperative and spending his spell slots in that way, or somehow isn't taking teleport, or just happen to not be fully leveled, I mean, there might just not be a fully leveled wizard in your party, then this is a great way to have access to animating undead and be able to slowly fill your ranks of commanded undead that way. And they are superior to regular skeletons and zombies. They're not going to stand up in high-level combat, but they will be better at least than, a default skeleton or zombie, so there is that to look at as an upside. At level 6, you're going to get Bonecraft Weapon. If you have 6 ranks in craft weaponsmithing, which is not the same as the craft armorsmithing that you needed to get into this prestige class, you can craft weapons with pieces of bone worked into them, and it works the same as regular weapon crafting. You can make them masterwork, which can be further enchanted. And in the hands of a Bone Knight of level 6 or higher, the Bonecraft Weapon deals a d6 points of extra damage against living creatures. And a Bonecraft Range Weapon will bestow this ability on the ammunition. It is cool to think about, maybe a spike chain made out of vertebrae bones or something like that. That would be suitably macabre for a Bonecraft Weapon. Otherwise, just something with some shards of bone set into the hilt or maybe even along the blade or something. It's certainly pretty cool aesthetically, and an extra d6 of damage against a lot of what you're going to be fighting is nice. But this ability is not really that fantastic. You could be getting this sort of ability from a whole lot of spells that you could be casting, and the spell slots you're missing out on from being a level behind in your spellcasting as a cleric would certainly make this not so worth it. As a paladin, I mean, it will make up for losing some of your Smite Evil by having this on all the time. So that is nice. It's a mediocre feature overall, but it's not terrible. At level 7, you're going to get another improvement to your Bonecraft armor. This is going to give you a 50% chance of negating any critical hit or sneak attack made against you. It also lets you fight without penalty even while disabled or dying. So that's pretty nice. It's basically Die Hard and Fortification for free. Those defenses are pretty nice. They are situational, but critical hits come up all the time, and hopefully being disabled or dying doesn't come up all the time, but if you are getting to that state, this will help keep you alive. At level 8, you're going to get Exoskeleton of Undeath. At this point, your Bonecraft armor fuses to your body and cannot be removed without killing you, which is going to be a pretty significant lifestyle alteration just to keep in mind. However, you're going to gain immunity to poison, sleep effects, paralysis, disease, death effects, fatigue, exhaustion, ability damage to your physical ability scores, ability drain, energy drain, and death from massive damage. And these immunities are fantastic. At higher levels, the monsters are going to be attacking your hit points less and less and be attacking your ability scores more and more. And some of those attacks are absolutely devastating. Just playing an undead character in the first place is a fantastic way to avoid a lot of the ills of being a high-level character. However, it does come with the downside, usually, of losing your Constitution score, and thus losing a lot of your hit points. Even with that D12 hit die, can't make up for having a high Constitution score, and as such, you're going to be really behind the curve there. However, with the Exoskeleton of Undeath, you get the benefits of being an undead without actually being an undead. Although, again, having that Bonecraft armor fused to you is going to make things difficult for you at social functions and probably in your day-to-day life. But it's going to give you a huge swath of immunities, and this is the reach feature of this prestige class. This is what you go into it hoping to grab. You're going to be behind a level in spellcasting to get to this, but it's going to be a fantastic set of immunities, and honestly, given the array of spells that you would have to cast to have this on, especially if you were looking for something like Divine Metamagic and Persist Spell sort of build to keep these immunities on you all the time, or replace it with various magic items, I actually think that by itself almost justifies taking this as a cleric if you have the intelligence score for it. Even if you miss out on the Bonecraft weapon at level 6 by not taking those ranks in craft weaponsmithing, if you do have the intelligence score, it might even be worth taking something like Open-Minded feat to get extra skill points just to get into this prestige class and get those immunities. And yeah, that might sound a little bit extreme, and yes, there are other ways to get these immunities, but this is a pretty good way to do it while getting a whole swath of other features. And there's not a whole lot of actual downside to it. This is a very strong set of defensive abilities, and it might be worth giving up a lot of other options to go for. And then at level 9, you're going to get Death Strike once per day. You use this before you attack in melee using your Bonecraft weapon, so you have to have taken that. And if the attack hits, then they have to make a Fortitude save of DC 10 plus your Bone Knight level plus your Charisma modifier or die. So this is probably something in the low to mid 20s. This is a necromantic death effect, so it won't work on a lot of opponents. But on a living opponent, I mean, a DC 25, Fortitude save, even a DC 20 Fortitude save or die isn't nothing. And since you don't need a lot of setup for this, like you do as an assassin, this is not a bad ability, certainly. It's not going to be scoring you a lot of kills, but it can be potentially ending a fight before it begins on a living opponent. This will always be a once per day 5% chance to instantly kill a living foe, and that's definitely not bad. It's not worth it as a capstone ability, but it's okay as a 9th level feature. It's not fantastic. If you want to dip out of the prestige class, now is a good time to do it after getting to level 8. Although at level 10 you are going to get Bonecraft Armor's final tier of ability, which is immunity to extra damage from critical hits and sneak attacks. So now you're immune to critical hits, which can be a real lifesaver. Same with sneak attack, that can really punish any rogues you go up against. That's going to be less common, but maybe if you go against a Gloom at epic levels, then it can be coming in handy there. It's debatable whether this is worth taking. I mean, you will be getting spellcasting advancement still, and since you can't go back into Paladin, if you were a Paladin, then there's really not a lot of reason not to just fill out this prestige class. Maybe you want to start taking levels in Fighter, but honestly, you might as well just stick with it at this point. You're going to have maxed out effectively a lot of your spellcasting for Paladin at this point, and it's going to be hard for you to get more without taking another prestige class that you somehow qualified for. So, looking at this prestige class overall, the 8th level feature is what everyone's going to want to go for. Getting all of those different immunities is really fantastic defensively. And as a frontline character, you're going to use those immunities quite a bit if you're a Paladin. If you're a Cleric, it's a little bit more debatable. Really, the calculus here is, do you want to use all those skill points and potentially sacrifice your capabilities as a Cleric by not having as many ranks in Concentration and Spellcraft as you would have wanted to have all these abilities and wait until probably character level 17 to get them, as well as delaying your acquisition of 9th level spells. And that's really a personal choice. It would really depend on the campaign. I would have to judge how mean the Dungeon Master is and using those sorts of monsters a lot. If they are, then by the time you're suffering through that, your saving throws are probably pretty high, and you could probably put on stuff like Death Ward to get by a lot of it. But just having that blanket immunity is really nice. There are magic items and other abilities that can replace this, but it's not a bad option, I would say. However, if you're really going to optimize your character as a Cleric, this probably isn't the best way to do it. And so overall, I would have to give the Bone Knight 4 stars for concept. It is a cool idea. 3 stars for execution. It is pretty average. You give up a level of spellcasting for a whole bunch of cool features. As a Paladin, maybe it's a better option overall, although your undead minions aren't going to be that great unless you're handing them like wands or other, spell trigger items, and they're somehow being able to set those off. But just as is, you're really going into it for the defensive options, which are great. There are other ways to get them. So I would give it 3 stars. I wouldn't give it 2. The big thing dragging down the Bone Knight is the amount of skill ranks that it requires, both for its prerequisites and for the Bonecraft weapon ability. I mean, that's going to be a total of 22 skill ranks, and that's going to be a pretty hard thing for a Cleric or Paladin. And given that Ride is going to be cross-class for Clerics, that's going to make it even more difficult. So, if this Prestige class only required 4 ranks in Ride, and maybe only 4 ranks in Craft Armorsmithing and Craft Weaponsmithing, that would be a little bit more tolerable. Still a significant investment, but you need to keep your concentration skill high. Even as a Paladin, you want at least something in it. And as a Cleric, you're going to want high ranks in Spellcraft. But perhaps I should just accept the fact that this Prestige class is meant for Paladins, and Paladins specifically, and that's the way that it is. Still, it would be nice if this Prestige class were a little bit more open for melee-focused Clerics to actually get some benefit from it, especially with the really cool immunities that it provides. So, that's going to be about it for this D&D 3.5 Prestige class review. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and so on. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time, here on 3.5 Archive.